America is great for the people at the top. Everybody else is just fighting to survive. And if you don't make it to the top, average life for the average American is quite stressful. The country and the culture sacrifices the well-being of its own citizens for financial gain. You can see this in the pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare industry. The housing market right now is ridiculous. The food industry, how everything is so processed and the food in the US is the worst. At this point in my life, I think the best move for me and a lot of people is that if you can make an income online, make US dollars and use that US passport, but live in another country. Just makes the most sense. You get the best quality of life and you can live quite comfortably in a lot of these places, knowing what my dollar can get in other places around the world, like in Latin America or in Southeast Asia, or even here in Europe. I don't mind paying a lot of taxes if I know where the money is going. Growing up in LA, seeing how incompetent our government is, we're paying all this money in these taxes, but I feel that the city is getting worse, education is getting worse, there's no public transportation, crime is the highest it's ever been. Why would I want to live in a place like that? So there's a few things that I think Europe does extremely well, starting with the work-life balance. In the US and many places in East Asia, like Japan and China and Korea, the pressure to constantly be working all the time is very, very intense. A lot of very successful people, and I saw this when I was doing real estate, they're all on drugs, they're alcoholics because their regular lives are actually hell. Europeans work, they have a lot of really good vacation time, but they know what's really important, and family and hanging out with your friends, and the social environment and atmosphere in Europe is so great. I love how all the cities here are designed from an infrastructure standpoint, being able to walk around and take public transportation everywhere, not needing to have a car, whereas in the US having a car is a necessity because if you don't have one, you can't do anything. You can't get anywhere, you can't work, you can't live your life. I love the public transport system because I feel like there's no pressure to bringing a car, finding parking, all that stress is all removed. And if I want to go out with my friends, all I gotta do is just call an Uber or get in public transportation and I can go home.
If you guys are interested in reaching out for a consultation, feel free to hit me up here. Also working on a new digital nomad course talking about how to set up your new life in any country around the world. It's still in the research phase, so if you guys can help by filling out the survey down below. Also, if you guys sign up, you'll get access to an early discount code as well.
A lot of EU countries have a passport that is just as strong as the American passport, if not better. In America, we have a lot of free travel around the world, but in Europe, you have all this travel and you can live in any European country. I eventually want to visit China, Russia, and India, and I think at the moment, as an American citizen, it may be a lot harder to get the visa, but if I applied, for example, to China as a Filipino citizen or a Spanish citizen, which is the one I'm going for, I feel like it will allow me to travel to places that maybe the US passport won't allow me to travel to. And something that I really like about Europe, I wish the US did this more. The way the US government is set up is that we have one big federal government that makes rules for a lot of the states, even though every single state is different. And I see the states in the US very similar to how all the European countries are, because they all exist in this one big body. They have the EU. Each country runs things the way that they want to do it based on their own culture, based on their own history and everything. I think that societies run better when there's more autonomous control amongst your own people. The US is amazing because it's a melting pot and everybody goes there in search for better opportunity. And I guess the US is very acceptant of other cultures, which is quite great. But I think that's the US's also biggest weakness. When you're accepting of everybody, you have no clear foundation or values to stand on. And I think that's why in America, we're constantly at battle or at war with our values or what we stand for or politics and everything, because there is no real thing that really unites us, right? When I went to the UK, it was quite fascinating to me because it did feel like a melting pot, very similar to the US, but I do feel like they still retain that British heritage, even though that might be going away now. I think they had a pretty good way of integrating other races there, and it does feel like a melting pot without having such a great focus on race, the same way that in the US, I'm always thinking about my race. I'm looking to move to Spain, and I know taxes are quite high. Knowing the quality of life that I will get in return, I actually think it is quite a fair trade. The problem that I have with taxes in the US, especially growing up in LA, I felt like our taxes were extremely high, but our quality of life was going down, and I could not trust that our government was putting the money into the right places. Because I don't make like a ton of money, these taxes aren't that big of an issue, but I think as soon as my income starts hitting like mid six figures, maybe if I ever get to the point where I'm starting making like million plus a year, then I will look at another place to live that's more tax friendly. But for the moment, because I'm still a small fish, I'm not too stressed about the taxes. I actually don't really care to live in a country where guns are legal. Guns are such an integral part of the US. There's no way that you can ever never take guns away from Americans. And I'm not gonna say that the US has a gun problem. That's a very simple argument for a much bigger issue of mental health. I don't really have a desire to go hunting or to, have a gun in my house or any of that. And for me personally, I just feel safer in a society where guns are illegal. As an Asian guy, I get treated differently the more that I travel everywhere in the world than how I do back in the US. I think things make me different now because BTS and K-pop really opened the door for us. But I remember growing up, Asians had so many poor negative stereotypes that were thrown onto us. If you pay attention to Asian representation on TV shows and media in the US, we've always seen as the dorks, the really feminine weak guy, and people didn't really take us that seriously. And it was unfortunate because I think those bad stereotypes from media carried over to how people viewed us in real life. I consider myself quite an attractive Asian, but I knew a lot of girls growing up who would not date me because of the fact that I was Asian. I know it sounds really messed up, but I know a lot of Asian Americans carry this chip on our shoulders. They have definitely feminized this a lot in Western media, and I think also with the rise of BTS, they almost look like women. I do think it is a step in the right direction, but I still think we have quite a big hill to climb compared to other places in the world. For example, when I was in Latin America, their view of Asian guys was that we were responsible, that we were very smart, that we were very disciplined, that we would never cheat on our spouses and all those things. All very good stereotypes. When I went to Southeast Asia, obviously we were around our own people, so we did quite well as well. And being here in Europe, I think in Western Europe, Asians are not seen as that attractive. The more central and east you go, especially towards like Russia, I've noticed that I get a lot more attention from girls. For some reason, like Russia and East Asia, because they're right next to each other, I think we've had a lot more exposure to each other. So Asian men and white Russian or Eastern European girlfriends are a lot more common. Because of my like traditionally masculine look, I find that a lot of the Ukrainian girls find me more attractive than the Polish girls. From what I hear, the Polish girls kind of like the K-pop look. Asians just don't really cause any problems. Everywhere we go, we set up a bunch of nice businesses, we bring some really good food, we don't cause any problems, we don't commit crimes, we don't steal, we don't murder, and we just kind of mind our own business. It made me really proud to be Asian. I think you can argue this point either way. I do think Europe in general is safer than the US. However, I think that is changing. A lot of the Western European countries are going through it right now. They're struggling with a lot of crime and having immigration problems and everything. Here in Poland, and also from what I've heard from Eastern Europe, I hear that it's quite safe. And coming from Colombia, Latin America in general, which is very, very dangerous, it's really nice being in an environment where I'm not having to constantly watch my back in case that someone's gonna try to rob me or anything, the same way that I did when I was in Colombia. I think Asia was also quite nice because I blended in with everybody. I felt the most safe there, but Europe is very, very safe as well. The woke culture in the US right now is quite insane. It's very funny when you talk to people from other countries about Americans because they see us as clown world. There are some liberal countries in the EU, for example, like France is quite liberal, Germany is quite liberal. All of them look at US as like the most liberal, crazy town of all the places. When I was walking around, for example, in Madrid, I visited my gay friend there who lived in the gay area. It just didn't feel like they were trying to shove all that stuff down my throat. It was more like, okay, gay people are here, we're accepting of them, and I'm fine with that. I have no problem with gay people at all. For some reason in the US with media, just the culture, it's like they are forcing us to have to be accepting of everything and of everybody and not to have any standards for anything. And I just did not like being in that environment. Maybe that's just kind of how LA is, because LA is probably the epicenter for that. The things that we value in celebrities, the way that we value money over family. There's no real sense of national pride or unity. These are all things that I find that other countries have all around the world that the US definitely lacks. You're gonna notice that the food quality in the US is so bad. Everything is extremely processed. If you talk to anybody from around the world who has lived in the US, they will tell you that because of the way of life and how bad the food is, they gain weight within a few weeks just by being there eating the food. For example, when I was in Asia or now here in Europe, the quality of the food is much better, and you can tell. Just the level of obesity within the national population is so different in other places in the world. I think growing up in the US, we get accustomed to seeing obese people everywhere, but then you come to Europe and you're like, everybody's thin, these women are so hot, and you're just like, what are we doing in America that's making everybody so fat? And it's not only like the food, but it's also this culture around obesity. You're not even allowed to have the conversation, which I find really, really weird. All of us know it's unhealthy, but saying that it's unhealthy and maybe people need to lose a little bit of weight can get you canceled. It's nice how in other places in the world, you don't even have to tell your girl to hit the gym gym because she knows how important being in good physical shape is. Asians will freaking grill you for being obese. European people don't even really work out that much, but because of how much they are walking everywhere, the quality of the food, and just overall general way of life, Europeans are just thinner and healthier. I also like how cultured Europeans are. I think in a lot of the Western European countries, many of them don't speak multiple languages, but from Central Europe eastward, a lot of them do, because they've had to coexist with other countries that have other cultures and other languages and histories. And this is something that I noticed with Asians and Europeans. It gives them a different view of the world. They're a lot more accepting and open-minded about other cultures. The thing with the US is that even though we all may look different, if we grew up in the US, we all become American and we adopt that way of life. We think the world revolves around us. And I think it's because we are geographically disconnected from the rest of the world. American way of thinking is like, America's the best, capitalism is the best. I just think that Americans lack a lot of nuance because they don't understand different points of view the same way that Europeans or Asians do. The more that I travel, after watching the interview with Tucker Carlson and Putin, learning a lot more about Chinese philosophy, it just makes me think a lot about the American way of mind and thinking and all the things that I was taught growing up. I just think that a lot of Americans lack perspective. I also find Europeans to be a lot more intellectual. That culture and that sophistication that Europeans have, I find it very sexy, to be honest. I love European fashion. Speaking multiple languages is a really amazing skill. I don't want to say that a place is perfect because after my experience in Colombia, I realized that a lot of people, when they go to a new place, everything is perfect, right? It seems like it's the best thing ever. The food is great, the people are great, and it's all sunshine and roses. But once you really get involved with the culture and you learn the language and you learn all of the bads about the place that you're at, it really changes your perspective. So now I want a lot more time to be able to live in a place for at least 6 months so I can properly identify the pros and the cons. Probably around maybe when I'm 33, 34 in a few years, then I'll finally decide where I want my forever home to be. I don't know if I'll stay here for the long term, but I do like the idea of raising my kids here in Europe. I'll have to see where my life takes me because my life is very unpredictable, and it also depends on the partner that I end up with. You know, maybe my opinion might change in a few years after spending time here in Europe. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.